Hello and welcome to Kellyapy, a self-help podcast. Well, it has been said by Ben Franklin, in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. And let's face it, none of us want to face either, but they are inevitable. I can't do anything about taxes, but I can certainly bring up the subject of death and how to deal with it. I cringe at the thought of losing loved ones. It's not something that I'm looking forward to or anybody looks forward to, but it's a fact and reality of living on this planet. Eventually, we all have to go. And those that go before us, it can be excruciatingly painful. I know in college, I lost my best friend, Amy. She was tragically murdered in her youth, and it threw me for a loop. You know, and as I got older, friends have died, loved ones have died, and I've had to learn how to deal with death. So with everything happening in society right now, I thought it would be a great topic to bring up and talk about dealing with death. How do you deal with death? Because right now, unfortunately, in this pandemic, there's a lot of death going around. And with that means there's a lot of sorrow and mourning going around. So I was thinking now is the perfect time to bring this subject up and talk about it, take it out of the shadows and bring it into the light. And the perfect person I thought to talk about this with was my friend, Katherine. Katherine's experienced a lot of death in various different forms that she's had to cope with throughout her life. Now, an interesting spin about Katherine is also a physician's assistant. So she has a medical mind on death, and she has the experience of dealing with losing a loved one, both medically and mentally. So I'm super excited to talk to Katherine about this today and get her spin on how she deals with death. So please welcome to the show, my friend, Katherine. Welcome, Katherine.
Thank you, Kelly.
So thanks for sitting down and talking with us about grief today. Like I said in the intro, I picked you to talk about this because I have heard you share on the subject before, and you have a really good grasp on it. Unfortunately, you've had a lot of experience dealing with grief. Why don't you go ahead and just kind of tell the audience a little bit about your story so they can understand where you're coming from?
Yeah. So I'll tell the background. That'll make the story make more sense. So I am the only child of my parents. My father was married before my mother and had two boys who I didn't actually get to know until I was 3. And they were both 10 and 15 years older than I. I was quite close to the oldest, Mark. Mark, my dad, and myself were very similar. And my other half-brother, Kevin, was very different from the three of us. And so my first real experience with grief was Mark's death. I was 13, and he actually died of AIDS. And at the time, it was 1988.
Oh, yeah.
And I was not told that. I didn't learn that until many years later, because I think my dad thought that would somehow change my opinion of him, which of course it wouldn't have. But he had been married for 5 months in this very elaborate ceremony. He married a girl from Nicaragua. And so the whole ceremony was in 2 different languages, and 7 people passed out. It was really interesting. It was August
Wow.
in South Florida, Episcopalian wedding times 2. So he, we don't know how he contracted AIDS, but anyway, he got PCP pneumonia and was dead 8 days later. And it was a very strange sensation for me because I wasn't super sad. And I felt guilty about that. Like I should feel devastated, but I didn't see him sick. And, he just wasn't there. And I used to only see him in the summers because I spent my summers with my dad. My parents were divorced when I was 4. And I was raised by my mom, and my mom and I were super, super close. Growing up, only child, single mom. And my mom had plans of having 5 kids and being a stay-at-home mom. Well, man plans and God laughs. So my dad doesn't like to be married very long, apparently. So he was married 3 times, twice to the same person, the third person, married and divorced twice. So when I was 4, my parents got divorced. My mom did not want that. And it was just the two of us during the school year. And then I spent my summers with my dad. So my relationship with my dad was a little bit complicated, but my relationship with mom was very straightforward. And, I went through my life, and she was a great life coach in addition to being a wonderful mom. And, she pulled herself up from, she never finished her college degree, but she ended up being the head of her department at the Indiana version of Duke Energy, which was Indianapolis Power and Light. She was like the manager of the dividends department and was very successful because my mom or my dad never provided any financial support. So that was all her. Mm-hmm. So I go through my life and everything's going great. I have my dream job, and most of my mom's friends ended up with breast cancer. And so, I remember when she would get her mammograms, I'd be paying attention. But I remember it was 2004 and I was working, and she called. She had gone traveling to Eastern Europe. She used to go on these European vacations with her brother and sister every summer. And she was putting together a photo album, kind of like a scrapbook of the event. And she said that it felt uncomfortable when she was sitting down, and she described it sort of as a urinary tract infection. And immediately, as a physician assistant, my spidey senses took off. I'm like, wait a minute, that's a mass effect. Urinary tract infections burn when you pee. When you don't pee, they feel different, but they don't take up space. And she goes, yeah, I particularly noticed it when I bent over to like paste some of the maps, or she would write out all the descriptions of the pictures. And so I panicked, and she's like, well, I talked to my doctor, and anyway, I'm going to go in and I'm getting an ultrasound tomorrow. So I was like, okay. And so she calls me the next day and reads me the report. And it's a huge ovarian tumor. And it's big. It's the size of a cantaloupe. And
oh, gosh,
I know the statistics, right? Ironically, being the researcher that I am, I looked briefly at the statistics and they sucked. And so I just said, and what was emphasized and all the stuff I read was, it's very individual. It's very individual. And I thought, you know what? I can't know this. Like normally for me, knowledge is power. Well, if knowledge is power and ignorance is bliss, they can't both be the same true at the same time. So I picked the ignorance is bliss thing. And I remember her trying to control my voice because she would know any little twinge in my voice, just like we all know. Now that I'm a mother, I know exactly what that means. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, trying to keep it together. And I remember driving to Huntersville that day because that was what I had to do for work, and having to pull over because I was crying so hard. I could not see straight. So this was 2004. And the big thing about ovarian cancer is the first, it always recurs almost all the time. And so the time between the initial diagnosis and the first recurrence is the best. That's the honeymoon period. And it was only 2 years. And I knew that was bad. So she had more treatment. She had tons of complications with that treatment. By then in 2009, so in the middle of all this, I meet and, Mr. Wonderful, and we get married in 2009, and she moved to Charlotte a month before the wedding. And we got a scan right before the wedding. Great. Everything's wonderful. And then I go, well, I didn't really have a honeymoon, but we go to Spain, and the scan comes back with, 1 centimeter tumor, which is, half an inch. But it's bad. I just feel the bad juju on that one. And so that begins. So she did that surgery to remove that thing in January of 2010. And she remained in the hospital until 2011. So she was in the hospital for a year with multiple complications, in and out of the ICU. And she would intermittently be home and then back in. And my husband's a vascular surgeon, but at the time he was a general surgery resident. She was a general surgery patient. So we would just directly admit her, just talk to my friend who's on call, make orders, go in. And it was insanity. In the middle of all this, I get pregnant, and eventually have the baby. And the question was, do I have a baby or do I wait till mom to die and then have a baby? You know, these were terrible choices to make because I wanted her to meet a grandchild, but I didn't think I could handle all of that at once, you know, and I'm working. Alex is working 100 hours a week. My husband's working 100 hours a week. So we do get pregnant. Both pregnancies were accidents, ironically, but a physician and a physician assistant can't plan a pregnancy. That's pretty pathetic, but well. So when my oldest was 8 months old, my mom died. But the way that she died was a really good story. You know, we had been doing everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. We bought that woman 2 more years. She had the nurses called her the unsinkable Molly Brown. Like, she had a reputation for like dodging bullets left and right. And she had an incredible pain tolerance, which almost caused medical complications, because otherwise we would know that you have 3 liters of small bowel fluid in your abdomen. No, a teaspoon of that would cause most people to be writhing in pain, but 3 liters didn't bother her a bit. She wanted Tylenol and she was up walking the halls. So at the end, you know, she had all these surgeries. There was one sort of final surgery they were trying to do to salvage and be able to leave her enough small intestine that she could still eat by mouth. And basically she had told me, look, if I can't eat, if I have to live on IV food, then I don't want to live. And I was like, I'm with you. I won't let that happen. So they did that surgery, and on post-op day 10, it failed. A fistula opened up. And so that was unsuccessful. So there was really no more surgical solutions. But then I was like, what are we going to do? Can't just let her starve to death, you know? So we let her eat, and it was kind of a weird situation there, but, and then she needed to get IV magnesium, 12-hour infusions every 10 days. Like, that was the only way she was going to be able to live. And I was at work one day and just had this really, really bad feeling that she was dead, like that she was in her bed, dead, and it was terrible. And so I called my aunt, who was staying with her, and she's like, no, she's fine. So anyway, I went over there and looked at her and just had this moment where I was like, okay, enough. This is enough. We've done enough. And I could visibly see her relax. Like, I had given her permission to die. And I knew I had to do it. I didn't want to do it, but I needed to do it. And I did. And I told her exactly how that would go. I said, it won't be painful because it's lack of magnesium. You'll have a heart attack. You'll have a arrhythmia, and you'll go. You may have some jaw contractions from lack of magnesium, but we can give you, medications for that. So we called hospice and got that going. And she went and got her address book out, her precious address book, which I had lost in the hospital one time before. And she blessed me out to no end, and called every single one of her friends. And several people flew in from all over the country to visit her for the last little bit of her life. And it was a beautiful death. She would lay on the couch. We'd think she was asleep, and we'd tell stories. And then she'd go, wait, that's not how that happened. You did this and you did that. And we're like, oh, sorry. She was holding court, as it was. And it was just, party. Everybody showed up and we went out. She was like, here's my credit card. And we go out to these lavish dinners every night. And, it was wonderful. And all her friends sat vigil when I couldn't be there, and she died. And so I had that experience of being able to say everything you wanted to say and be done. And then my other experience was the sudden ripping out. My dad was killed in a car accident 3 weeks before I was supposed to visit him after not seeing him for 3 years. And that one burns in a different way because we had an uneasy relationship. I was really the parent in that relationship. But I had made a commitment to go and visit him, like to use my frequent flyer miles and take my vacation, because I always thought, you need to come to me. You did me wrong, so you come to me. And then I finally got old enough to go, no, he did the best he could. He's got problems. Let's go visit him. We were going to go skiing. He was living in Durango, Colorado at the time. And right around my birthday, which is November 14th, he called me, and I didn't pick up the phone because I was doing something. And I thought, I'll talk to him tomorrow. Well, that was the last phone call he ever made. And his car hit black ice, and that was it.
Wow.
And so that's unfinished business. I don't know. I think terminal death is easier because you do get to settle your affairs, as it were, but there's no languishing. So I've had, both of those experiences. And
Well, that's interesting. So with that, the grieving process for those who are not aware, it starts off with denial, and then it goes into bargaining, and then you have anger and depression, and it kind of whittles between all of those back and forth until finally it settles on acceptance and you're on the other side. So that's in a nutshell the grieving process. So how did the grieving process go with your mother, who you had time to kind of work through the process that she was going to die, and God knows, you're a physician's assistant. You literally told her, hey, here's the deal. And then your dad, where it was just like, boom, like I talk about my college roommate who was suddenly taken from me, So how did the grieving processes differ from you?
One thing I can say about the grieving process in general, and what I had to learn, because I feel like I know everything, and that turns out to the more I know, the more I learn, the less I know, is that the grieving process is not linear. You don't go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4 to step 5. And acceptance doesn't mean I have to like it. So with Dad, denial is how every funeral gets planned. Okay. Because if we had to take the full weight of the loss of a loved one all at once, you'd be paralyzed. You wouldn't be able to. Your
body can't handle it, can it?
Right. You just could not take all that in. So you wouldn't be making phone calls and picking flowers. And so, none of that stuff. It would all be meaningless. So I definitely went through those stages back and forth. I never revisited denial because there was no denying it. I got the phone call, the cops came to the door, just like Law and Order, I'm like, somebody's dead. That's the only reason you're here. So that was, I was in denial for a long period of time because I didn't see it. And then I eventually came to acceptance, but I was back and forth between anger and depression and acceptance. I didn't try to bargain because it was too quick. Now,
for your dad.
Mom, yeah, right. With Dad, it was just like, boom. Okay, it's there. I saw the crime scene photos. It's not a crime scene, but I saw the accident photos, and that somehow helped. A lot of people thought that was more, but I'm like, I have to see it. I have to. That's how I roll. Now with Mom, denial. I didn't spend much time at denial. I saw the scan. I can read that. In fact, I remember one of the hardest moments was seeing her name on an X-ray jacket. And, I've seen a zillion, but not one with her name, her date of birth. And I was like, this is just wrong. And so then it was like denial to anger and lots of bargaining. That's what we spent a lot of time at bargaining.
Well, you said we were talking a little ahead of time, and you kind of were saying, you both being doctors, your idea of bargaining was.
It's like, I'll take pulmonary embolism for 5. Okay. What do you got for me? I have a greenfield filter. We're going to do that. And some of her TC scans, I looked at them like, holy, what? How are you living through this? So I think we did some bargaining, and we talked about it. I think we bargained for 2 more years, truthfully. I think, God was like, all right, I see your PE and I give you 2 years, granted. The anger and depression turned inward for me. I refused to accept it. And my refusal to accept it caused me lots and lots of emotional pain. And if I could go back and do things differently, I would like to move to acceptance. And I like to use the word transcendence there, because really, you never accept it. You don't want, you haven't accepted Amy's being gone. It is, but you don't accept it like, oh, this is great. It just is. And so, but we can transcend the pain and the hole that's left behind when a person leaves our lives by, making sure we don't fall apart ourselves, and make sure we give all the love to our loved ones that they would be giving them. If Mom was around to be there for my kids, that would be great, but she's not. So I have to do that. And that transcendence is the key, I think, to, I don't want to say get over, because there's no such thing. It's to like move through it. It's like, separating a veil between one world and the next. You just have to move through that, and it's painful.
Well, yeah, I know you you obviously experience like when your loved one goes to the other side, you experience that immediately. I'm sure, like depression and anger are adamant there. They're
right.
showing
They're
up
so loud that you can't hear anything else.
Yeah, they're all. Yeah, you're probably just immersed in it at that point. And then as time does go on, you kind of like the process works. You work through and, like you said, transcend to a place of, okay, I can get through my day without breaking down crying.
Right.
I can get through my day. I can do this, and still they're in the back of your mind always, right?
Always.
A day doesn't go by. I don't think about my friend.
One of my favorite sayings is the price of great love is grief. With great loves comes great loss. And, we always say it's better to love than have lost than never loved at all. And that's true. But that's the price you pay. Like eventually all of our loved ones will leave us at some point. We lose pets, we lose friends, we lose grandparents. When things go in the normal order of things, your parents are supposed to go before you. That's normal. Doesn't make it less hard. We're not supposed to lose our children. Is that worse? I don't know. I don't want to experience that. I know people that have. But that movement through that, like you're right. Like now when I think of Mom, I can laugh more than cry. And it'll be 9 years this November. Yeah.
Wow.
So that means it'll be 13 years since my dad died. So I think certain bigger losses take longer time. I also lost my cousin who I grew up with. We were the same age. He died when we were 40, which was 6 years ago. It'll be 6 years ago this November. And that was huge too. But I had learned from Mom, and I was able to offer to my family members, here's what's going to happen. I told them play by play, hour by hour. I'm like, this is the end. And they're like, his feet are cold. I'm like, this is what death looks like. This is death of the body, not death of your love for him. So,
I love that.
Right. The body has, given up the ghost. But his soul is there. Your love for him will keep him alive. So just, make him comfortable. And that's what I did. I made him comfortable. And then I was like, just touch him, just hold him. Cause this is it. You've got 12 hours. And I was right. It's 13 hours. He died later.
And do you find that the grieving process, like you said, you're always like going to have those feelings and stuff. Do you find though, like on the anniversary, I know every anniversary when it gets close to your mom's death, it's super hard on you because the emotions come back. It is. Do you feel like you go through the grieving process and like anniversaries and things that you wish?
And one thing about grief, in addition to that, not just anniversaries, every other loss will like thresh up old griefs. So anniversary of my dad, I think about my mom. Anniversaries of any other things. I recently just went through breast cancer. I found out my surgery date on the anniversary of Mom's death. And so didn't plan that very well. And so that hit me harder than normal. But yeah, any grief, any loss will, there's like, I don't know if there's some data on this, but anyway, there's a part in my brain, I can only speak for myself, that gets triggered. And all these memories, good, bad, how they mesh together, that any loss, even of something minor, can bring up the old griefs that you haven't processed some of those feelings. And I don't think you ever completely process feelings. You miss people. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's life after grief. 100%. My cousin's wife is, raising those 2 kids, and she makes sure that he's involved, even though he's not there anymore, so that his children won't forget him.
That's an important point to bring up. Because when you're in the grieving process, when you're in the heart of the grieving process, you feel like it's never going to end. You feel like this is never going to get better, but it does. It really does.
It does. Everything gets easier. Time is a great healer. As we like to say in medicine, apply a little tincture of time and you'll feel better. And it's true. Time does heal most wounds. And the wound part, time heals the wound. But that doesn't, diminish the love we have for the people that we've lost. But then it can be seen more as a positive thing. And occasionally it'll wince a little bit where you're just like, oh God, I wish Mom was here for this. Or I wish, Dad was here to see this. And so that's hard. But I know, especially with Mom, she's not suffering anymore. And Lord knows my dad was a super difficult guy. I can't imagine him being a curmudgeon. He would be 82 right now and probably freaking out about the political system and driving me insane. And I'd be like, geez, so, maybe God knew better than I did. And I remember just kind of laughing when he died. He and Mark, my brother that died, were very close. And of course, his truck went and split into 3 pieces. And I just remember having a moment, even in the middle of the part of it, laughing, thinking, I can just see him, going to Mark up in heaven going, you should have seen it. The truck flew up and separated. I mean, I went down in a blaze of glory. He goes, you died.
It was the way he would want to go, right?
Precisely. Yes. And, and I could just see them high five. And he's like, yeah, I died with a tube in my throat, but you went down in a blaze of glory. And so I was able to take some comfort in that. I have a little story about my dad, if you want to hear something that
go ahead. And then we'll close up.
My dad was really into Native American spirituality and was into these like totem animals. And one of his main totem animals was an owl. And so after I got the news, it was like 24 hours later after I got the news from the police that, he had died, and I was brushing my teeth. And I remember thinking, I was brushing my teeth when I got the news 24 hours ago. And I finally broke down and lost it. I had kept it together for a whole day. And then I heard an owl right outside of my window in like uptown Charlotte. Like, what's an owl doing there? And I knew that's my dad trying to contact me. And that's kind of the way we were. Like, he was a little bit new agey, spiritual stuff. So I ran to the backyard and I talked to an owl. I did not know they had more things than hoo-hoo, but they do. So I was like, Dad, is that you? And it was like, hoo-hoo. And I asked it questions like, are you here to tell me that everything's okay? And it responded in these other owl sounds that I cannot imitate. But I asked several questions. And finally I said, I got it. I got the message. And it took off and flew. I mean, I couldn't have reached it, but it was wingspan about 4 feet across, huge owl. And then I was at peace. I was at peace. I knew that. And that's one of those best ones. And then I have one more. My grandmother died, my mom's mom, and she was old in a nursing home, so it was a sad loss. And we were all at her, staying the night in the funeral for the funeral the next morning, and nobody could sleep. We were all in a neighbor's house because she grew up in a tiny town. There are no hotels. And I kind of had one of those half sleep, half awake dreams. And I pictured her. Now, I never met my grandfather. He died. My mom was 6. So he was standing in this like smoke-filled dance floor, and the song Spirit in the Sky by Norman Greenbaum was playing. Yeah. Which I'm not sure if she liked that song or not, and she was very religious, and she was wearing this beautiful purple dress, and he held out his hand and she looked down and stepped over something, it was all smoky. And then they started dancing. And again, I was at peace. And this happened before my dad dies, because this happened in 1996. And I remember telling everybody about it. And we call that the nanny song. Is every time I hear that, that was calming. And, so that happened then. And when my dad died, so I wasn't super surprised that he, tried to contact me, but I got it. I knew he was like, it's cool. I'm okay. And I was fine. And a lot of my mom's friends who had lost husbands, they were like, I would love to have that experience. I would just wish my loved one would contact me. And I would say, if you look, you'll find. I expected that, and it came. So I've had some of those moments where I've been soothed by the beyond, that's with me, my friend Amy that I talk about that I lost, the song Wind Beneath My Wings always play at key moments when I'm like in the middle of a cruise, we're sitting on a beach in the middle of a cruise, and I'm with my best friend Lisa, who was also good friends with Amy, and we're like, gosh, Amy would have loved this. And then next thing you know, the reggae band starts playing Wind Beneath My Wings. And we're like, oh, Amy's here. So we're like, and it's one of those, my loved ones, and it brings you peace. Yeah. But we are running to the end. We're coming to the end here, Katherine. So I like to end my podcast with the guests getting to kind of share a message of hope to help and heal. So for the person out there grieving the loss of a loved one today, what's your message of hope to help them heal? Well, my message of hope is that if you loved this loved one, then they would not want you to fall to pieces over their death. And it hurts. but that is the price of great love. And so if you can take that love in, how your loved one would want you to feel, and just hold it close to you at those times when it just seems like you can't move forward. That is the sustenance. That is the spice of life that can get you to move forward. It absolutely gets better for everyone, no matter how great the loss, no matter how tragic. These people can transcend the loss, can transcend the hole that's left behind, and what you fill it with is love. And either love that can pour out or love coming in. That is the only way that I have been able to overcome any of these losses. And I know more losses will come, but I know that I can transcend it. I can be angry. I can feel all those feelings, and they're valid, and give them space and love yourself through that. Don't feel guilty about moving on. Some people really can't do that. And bring, love out. If that's your action, to miss the person you love other people around you, love the people that are left. And that will fill up that hole, that giant hole that your loved one's absence is taking up. And that is the only way I've been able to move forward, is to throw out love. And then just like a boomerang effect, it comes right back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, interesting fact here, Katherine. I know you're into your facts.
I love facts.
Since we're talking about grieving the loss of a loved one, back in the 40s or 50s, when Alcoholics Anonymous was just starting, one of the people happened to look in the newspaper, and there was an obituary. And in the obituary, this woman was grieving the loss of her mother. And in there, she wrote this prayer. And of course, Alcoholics Anonymous looked at us and this is perfect. We'll take it. It's ours. And today we have come to know this as the Serenity Prayer. So I thought this would be the perfect prayer to end this podcast on, because it does deal with grief if you listen to it. So I'm going to go ahead and say the Serenity Prayer, and then we will close this out. So here we go. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's so beautiful. And the topic of grief is a difficult one to talk about, but I think a powerful one to talk about. And I can't thank you enough, Katherine, for coming and talking with us and sharing your stories about grief today.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
And to my listeners, thank you so much for tuning into Kellyapy.
Please don't do that.
Thank you so much for tuning into Kellyapy today. We are officially in season 3. If you enjoyed the podcast, subscribe. We're going to be doing this for half an hour each week. If you'd like more positive messages, you can check out my YouTube blog, Monday Messages. Until next week, have a great week, and we'll see you next week for another edition of Kellyapy. Bye-bye.